Have you ever woken up in the morning with that heavy feeling in your chest, even before you remember why? Before the coffee, before the phone, before anything else, that tightness has already arrived. If you answered yes, this video was made for you. Because today I am going to prove to you that what you are feeling is not weakness. It is the sign that a cycle is closing, and that something completely new is about to begin in your life. Stay until the end. What I am going to show you will change the way you view everything you have lived through up to this point. Let me ask you a direct question. You feel like you work twice as hard, strive more than most, do the right thing, try, pray, resist, and yet it seems like life just hands you blow after blow. You achieve one thing here, lose another there. You stand up, catch your breath, and then comes another one. A relationship that crumbles, bills that don't add up, health that tests you, a child that worries you, a dream that gets postponed. And in a moment of exhaustion, you ask yourself in silence, what is wrong with me? I need you to hear this with total clarity. Nothing is wrong with you. What you are going through has a name, it has a logic, and more importantly, it has an expiration date that has already passed. Today I am going to show you 3 things that will completely reorganize your vision of what you've crossed. First, why chosen people suffer differently than others. Second, what happened in the spiritual realm while you thought you were being abandoned?
Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life, a guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming, with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10,000 readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you, who were tired of living in the fog, ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment.
And third, how to identify that the cycle has truly broken and what comes after that. Let's start with something that science and faith agree on at the same time. There is a phenomenon studied by psychology called intergenerational accumulated pain. Researchers at Stanford and other leading American universities have already mapped out how patterns of trauma, abandonment, poverty, violence, fear are transmitted from generation to generation within families. Not in a mystical way, but in a concrete way, in the choices parents make, in the beliefs children absorb, in the behaviors that repeat without anyone noticing. You know that family story that everyone knows, but no one talks about directly. That wound that has been swept under the rug for decades. That's it. A pattern of destroyed relationships. Money that never stays. Anxiety that passes from mother to son as if it were a natural inheritance. And then comes the part that science alone cannot fully explain. Why do some people within these families feel from an early age that they were born for something different? Why are there people who, even coming from histories of pain, carry within them a visceral refusal to conform? Why do some people suffer more, feel more, question more, and yet still don't give up? The answer lies in what spirituality calls a calling. And whoever carries a calling cannot be broken by the same forces that broke those who came before. But before I continue, do me a favor. If you have ever woken up with that tightness in your chest that I described at the beginning, comment the word "free" down below. Just that. You will understand why later on. And if this content is touching something inside you, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel. We don't sell illusions here. We talk about real transformation, with depth, with respect for your intelligence and your faith. Now I need to tell you about the years of silence. If you are over 35 years old and are watching this video, it is very likely that you went through a phase, perhaps you are still in it, where your prayers seemed to hit the ceiling, where you asked, cried out, wept, promised, and nothing changed. Or it changed so slowly that it felt like divine cruelty. You looked around and saw people who seemed not to care about anything being blessed. And you, who tried to do right, who worked yourself to the bone, who was honest, who took care of your family, you stood still, waiting, without an answer. This period has a name in the Bible. It has a name in psychology. And it has a purpose that most people can only see once they have already passed through it. In the Christian tradition, this period is called the wilderness. And it is not punishment, it is preparation. Think with me, Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before leading an entire nation. Joseph spent years in prison before becoming the second most powerful person in Egypt. David was anointed king while he was still tending sheep, and it took decades of persecution, caves, and humiliation before he sat on the throne. Do you think these men didn't question? Do you think they didn't have nights where faith weighed more than certainty? Of course they did. And that is exactly why their stories continue to echo thousands of years later. Because the depth of the preparation is proportional to the weight of the destiny. And now I need you to hold on to this. If your battle was intense, if the years of waiting were long, if the pain seemed unfair in its proportion, it wasn't for nothing. The intensity of the process is never random when there is a greater purpose at the finish line. But here comes the point that most spirituality videos don't have the courage to address head-on. The pain you felt was not just yours. There is a heritage of suffering that many American families have carried for generations. Dr. Sarah Montgomery, a reference in mental health in the United States, speaks about how the unresolved trauma of one generation deposits itself into the next, often in ways that those involved cannot even name. It is the son who replicates the absence of the father who was never there. It is the daughter who chooses partners who abandon her in the same way her mother was abandoned. It is the grandson who carries the economic anxiety of the grandmother who survived the Great Depression. You didn't choose to enter this cycle, but you were chosen to get out of it. And breaking out of a cycle that has repeated for decades, sometimes centuries within a lineage, is no simple task. It requires exactly what you lived through, facing what others avoided, feeling what others numbed, staying upright when the pattern screamed for you to fall. And you stayed up. That is no small thing. That is the most courageous gesture a human being can make. Now I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, at least to yourself. In the last few weeks, have you felt something different? An unexpected lightness, a moment of peace that didn't make sense given the circumstances, a strange sensation that something was moving, even without seeing concrete proof yet? If so, pay attention to what comes next, because this is not a coincidence. There is a concept in quantum physics called the inflection point. It is the exact moment when a system that was under pressure reaches its maximum limit of tension, and from there, the only possible direction is transformation. Boiling water turning into steam, the seed that cracks its hard shell so the sprout can come out. There is no sprout without the shell breaking. And the breaking of the shell from the inside out does not feel like liberation at first. It feels like destruction. How many times have you felt like you were falling apart? That you were losing parts of yourself that you didn't even know you needed to lose? The anxiety that gripped you in the morning. The fear that the peace was temporary, that the good phase was a trap. The inner voice that whispered that you weren't enough, that you didn't deserve for it to last, that it would all go away as soon as you let your guard down. Those voices have a technical name. They are patterns of limiting beliefs installed by experiences of abandonment, betrayal, and repeated loss. The human brain, to protect itself, begins to anticipate pain before it arrives. You start to boycott joy because you learned in very concrete ways that joy used to be followed by the ground giving way. But here is the turn. When the cycle truly breaks, these voices don't disappear all at once. They echo. Like the thunder that still resounds after the lightning has already passed. The noise is still there, but the threat is already gone. What you are hearing is no longer the present. It is the past, trying to pretend it still has power over your future. And it doesn't. Now let me show you the concrete signs that the cycle has broken. And as I speak, see how many of them you recognize in your life right now. First sign. You have started to respond differently to situations that used to completely destabilize you. Someone provokes you, and you don't react the same way. A disappointment arrives, and you don't crumble like before. You still feel it, but the fall is no longer a free fall. This isn't coldness, it is spiritual and emotional maturity. It is the result of years of refinement. Second sign. The wrong people have started to leave your life. And I know that hurt. But pay attention, many of these departures were not accidents, they were alignments. When you break an internal pattern, the external field must reorganize. Those who are connected to your pain can no longer sustain themselves near your healing. Third sign. You have started to have clearer intuitions. That feeling that something isn't right before you have proof. That internal certainty that a specific path is yours, even without anyone's approval. This is spiritual discernment being fine-tuned. It's as if the noise decreased and the voice that matters became clearer. Fourth sign. You have started to hunger for things that used to seem distant. Not for possessions, for purpose, for presence, for genuine connection, for doing something that matters. This hunger isn't greed, it is vocation waking up. If you recognized yourself in at least two of these signs, what comes next is specifically for you. The Bible speaks in the book of Joel about the restoration of the years that the locusts have eaten. It is one of the most specific and emotionally precise promises in all of Scripture. Because it doesn't just talk about recovering what was lost, it talks about receiving double for what was consumed. It's not a metaphor. It is a functional description of what happens when a cycle of destruction is interrupted by a decree of purpose. The years you lost trying to fix what wasn't meant to be fixed, the relationships that drained your energy, the money that left before it arrived, the time that passed while you were standing still, waiting, without understanding. All of this enters a process of divine compensation when the purpose is confirmed. And the compensation doesn't always arrive in the form you expect. It arrives through channels you weren't monitoring, through connections that emerge out of nowhere, through opportunities that appear at the exact moment when you are no longer trying to force them, through peace that arrives on an ordinary day and that you realize is no longer the peace of someone who is surviving. It is the peace of someone who knows they are safe. Here is what I want you to understand about your identity. For years, perhaps decades, you were defined by your losses, by the betrayal you lived through, by the abandonment that left a scar, by the phase where everything crumbled and people saw it. You carried these episodes as if they were your essence, but your identity was never your pain. Your identity is what remained intact inside you while the pain tried to define you. You kept the faith when there was no evidence to sustain it. You continued taking care of people when you yourself were in need of care. You refused crooked paths when it would have been much easier to give in. You resisted. And this act of resisting, repeated over years, engraved something into your character that cannot be erased. A quiet firmness, an authority that doesn't need to shout, a presence that arrives before your words. The people around you have already started to notice this. Perhaps they haven't named it yet, but you will notice it in the ways they seek you out, how they consult you, how they feel steadier after talking to you. This isn't chance. It is the evidence of a process that was slow, but was real. Before reaching the final point, I need to ask you one thing. If you have someone close to you who is in the middle of the battle right now, that friend you know is in the wilderness, that sister who is at rock bottom, that person who sent a message this week saying they were exhausted, send this video to them. Now. Not later. Now. Because sometimes the word that breaks the cycle comes from the mouth of someone you least expect, at the moment you least expected to receive it, and you can be the messenger of that word today. And subscribe here to the channel, turn on the bell, because what you found here today is not ordinary content, and you will want to be present when the next one arrives. So let's close with what is perhaps the most important part of all this. What comes after the end of the cycle? Many people are afraid to answer this question, because after so many years of being defined by the struggle, the idea that the struggle is over generates a strange kind of disorientation. You might find yourself waiting for the next blow, analyzing the piece as if it were a trap, questioning if you deserve what is arriving. This is normal. It is the nervous system trying to protect you with the reflexes it built over years of survival. But I need to tell you this: you are going to learn to receive. Not all at once, but you will learn. You will learn to receive joy without the guilt that someone is going to charge you for it. You will learn to receive genuine connection without the anxiety that it will leave. You will learn to receive provision without the fear that it was a mistake. You will learn to sleep with peace and wake up without that tightness. Not because life became perfect, but because you know, with a knowing that comes from within, that you are covered. There is a huge difference between surviving and inhabiting. For years you survived. From now on, you begin to inhabit what was prepared for you. Your relationship with time will change. You will stop racing against the clock thinking you missed your hour, because the hour of someone with a purpose is not dictated by a human calendar. It is dictated by alignment. And when you are aligned, things arrive at the moment they need to arrive, neither too early to catch you unprepared, nor too late to make you give up. The people who will enter your life in this new cycle do not arrive with built-in conflict. They arrive with connection. They arrive with a purpose complementary to yours. They arrive with genuine contribution, not with a demand disguised as affection. You will know how to recognize the difference because your discernment was calibrated exactly for this in the years of refinement you crossed. And your home, your work, your health, your finances, all of this begins to reflect what has already happened on the inside. Because the external is always a consequence of the internal, and your internal went through a transformation that very few people have the courage to cross to the end. Let me close with an image. Have you ever seen those trees that grow in places of constant wind, on the edge of cliffs, in soils that seem to sustain nothing? They grow crooked, with exposed roots, with trunks marked by the storm. But they are the firmest trees that exist, because the resistance to the wind didn't weaken the root, it deepened it. It is impossible to uproot a tree that grew against the wind. You are that tree. Every adversity that tried to break you only made your roots go deeper. Every period of drought taught you to seek water where others cannot reach. Every winter that seemed eternal prepared you for a spring that won't last just one season. And now the season has turned. It isn't hope. It isn't a wish. It is a decree.